Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting Australian Indian Radio's daily live Facebook updates. And it's wonderful to have you here. I hope your Saturday so far has been very good. Yes, it's 18th of July already, and a beautiful and a wonderful Queensland Saturday out there. And for all of you out there enjoying the sunshine and enjoying the great Queensland weather, good on you. Well, I'm glad that you have joined in, and it's always good to see you. Well, the maximum temperature for today will be 23 degrees, and there's a 0% chance of rain. So sunny, light winds, fire danger is low to moderate, and sun protection is recommended from now till about 1:30, and the UV index is going to stay at 4, which is moderate. And further outlook for Sunday. Sunday will minimum of 10, so you're going to get a pretty cold overnight. And the maximum tomorrow will be 24 degrees, and again 0% chance of rain. So pretty dry time of the year. And the Brisbane area will be light winds and sunny. Sun protection tomorrow once again from 10 till about 1:30 p.m. with the UV rating still at 4. So there you are, up to date on Australian Indian Radio's daily live Facebook update. Well, let's look at the COVID and the numbers. Queensland, 1,071, recovery at 1,058, the death toll remains at 6. And whole of Australia, the confirmed cases so far is 11,253. And the recovery is 8,117 with 116 deaths. Worldwide, well, we were talking about 10, 11, 12. Now we have crossed the mark and we're on to 13.9 million, getting close to that 14 million mark. So 13.9 million confirmed worldwide, and the recovery 7.8 million, 593 deaths recorded. So those are the figures. Now, once again, once we have said that we are probably at the tail end of this, but then something again happens and we find out that no, that is not the case, that we are still far from reaching the end of this pandemic. There's so many questions that's going to be asked. What is going to happen with the post-September, with the JobKeeper, and how are people going to sustain their work, their employment, and the small businesses, keeping up with the leases, with the higher purchases and all the other commitments that they have out there. Some businesses are doing well, even though it is the COVID-19 situations, but others are not doing so well and they are struggling. So, the big question there would be, how are we going to go forward? How are we going to move forward? And what is it going to look like? The economic recovery, and of course, the fight for the vaccine and the creation of the vaccine, as we know, is happening worldwide, and everyone's trying to get on the bandwagon, so much so that there have been cases of where, espionage, where people have been looking at tapping into other countries and their researches and trying to find a cure or coming up with that vaccine before others do that. So that is the case of the world. So that's the beginning, the intro for today. Well, the story for today is we're going to look at the Government House, the grand old building. It never ceases to amaze. Every time you go up there, it is just so beautiful. I have been there so many times. My first visit there was when I was the president of Hindu Society of Queensland. The governor then had hosted a lunch function, and I happened to be sitting right next to her. And, on the invite, on the lunch invite, it didn't say that we will all have to talk about our organizations and our respective faiths and etc. So here we are all sitting down ready to have a good lunch, and then she says, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, there is no such thing as free lunch in this world. You will all have to talk about your organizations and your faiths. And I, sitting next to her, happened to speak first. So anyway, from that day I started a little bit more research. So that was my first introduction to the grand government house. Now, I've been there many times. We go there every year as a reception for White Ribbon, and there's many other community functions and events that we have attended there. But as I said, the protocol and just the pristine surrounding, it is just so amazing. And lately I was there for my OIM presentation when I received that medal, and yesterday we were there for a intimate lunch with the governor and few of the invited recipients of the awards from different categories, from the community, from the QPS department, and from the fire. So very small intimate lunch reception by the governor. And I'll tell you what, yesterday I discovered another part of the government house which I had never seen before, the pavilion. It's out in the bush amongst the trees, nestled up high, and it is just one amazing little venue, and we will have a look at that. So of course, anything that happens there always happens in the grand style. So even the buggies have got that crown in the front. So that is amazing to see that those buggy ride that took us to the pavilion. And of course, we were allowed to take our partner. So Usha accompanied me there as well. And if you look at the tables being set up, everything's set up so nicely and so properly. So this is the little venue called the pavilion. As you can see from the outside, that it looks like that you are actually sitting in the forest, and it is just so amazing there. And the hospitality, of course, being the government house, is never second to none. Now, to get there, first of all, you arrive in the front, then you are taken there in the beach buggies. So there we go, the buggies taking us to that magnificent venue called the pavilion. Going past that point, looking at the house, which is just so wonderful. And as I said, every time you drive past there, it never ceases to amaze you. It's always so beautiful and pristine, very well maintained. So, the second buggy following us all the way to the pavilion. And going through the thick bushland there, because there's about 14 hectares, we will look at the history of the government house as well in a minute. But it is just so wonderful, and it's an amazing feeling to be there. So right now, let's go and look into deep down into the history of the government house.
Nestled amongst the hills of Paddington, only 4 kilometres from central Brisbane, lies one of Queensland's most important heritage estates, a grand residence surrounded by 14 hectares of formal gardens and native bushland. Currently the official residence and office of Queensland's 26th Governor, His Excellency the Honourable Paul de Jersey AC.
Welcome to Government House Queensland, the official residence of the Governor. My name is Darren Yupp, the Hospitality Services Manager. In a moment we'll be going behind the scenes at Fernberg, and along the way you'll be hearing from me as well as some of my colleagues. But for now, let's hear a little bit about the early history of Fernberg. I'll see you inside.
Fernberg was built in many stages. The first in the 1860s in burgeoning Brisbane, when successful German-born merchant Johann Häusler commissioned a grand villa. Completed in 1865, it had a slate roof, airy verandas and an attic in the small tower above a handsome sandstone entrance. Häusler named it Fernberg, German for distant mountain.
We are here in the original 1865 part of the house, which is still very much in use today, including the state dining room, but we'll come back to that later.
Government House is the repository of many items of historical significance. Artworks like this painting by William Robinson, and artefacts like this piano stool from Old Government House chart the historical development of Queensland and of Fernberg. By 1872, Häusler was bankrupt and Fernberg was acquired by creditors. It was purchased in 1884 by pastoralist and politician Robert Stevenson. who engaged prominent architect Richard Gailey to transform Fernberg from grand hilltop villa into a striking Italianate mansion, replete with iconic tower and grand entrance, a stately carved cedar staircase and a magnificent stained glass window depicting Scottish hero King Robert the Bruce. Stephenson's fortunes, however, mirrored Häusler's, and in the mid-1890s, Fernberg was mortgaged.
Remember the stool that was mentioned? The Stephenson family continued to live here until 1910, when the stool was brought up, heralding a new era of Fernberg as the official residence of governors.
Old Government House at Gardens Point was the governor's official residence from 1862 until 1909, when it became part of Queensland's first university. The government then acquired Fernberg in 1910 as a temporary residence while more permanent accommodation was sought. Many original items of furniture, including the stool and the 24-seat state dining table, built from local yellowwood in 1896, were relocated to Fernberg. Royal portraits were to be hung. Important constitutional and administrative duties took place. Fernberg's status as a temporary government house ended in the 1930s, when it became the permanent vice-regal residence, marked by the addition of the eastern wing, including 2 formal function rooms.
And I'm in one of these 2 rooms, the drawing room, where the Governor receives state callers and the occasional royal visitor, and with Mrs de Jersey hosts functions in support of Queenslanders who make a worthy community contribution. My name is Melanie, and I am one of a small team of civilian and uniformed aides. Our role is to facilitate the Viceregal program and provide protocol advice, such as the playing of the Viceregal anthem to acknowledge the Governor's presence. Importantly, we seek to ensure the Governor's busy program runs to time, which isn't always an easy task.
The second room, added in the 1930s, later called the Investiture Room, is used for presenting Queenslanders with awards and honours, and for constitutional duties such as swearing in premiers and ministers. A number of other buildings have since been erected on the estate. However, the structure and appearance of the main house remained relatively unchanged until 2015, when 2 lifts and a new covered walkway were added. Fernberg preserves the rich history of our state and people, a distinctly Queensland place where state visitors are warmly welcomed, where remarkable contributions are acknowledged and the finest Queensland hospitality provided, and where the Governor, as the representative of our head of state, Her Majesty the Queen, fulfills important constitutional, ceremonial and community duties. It is a house for all Queenslanders.
We're up here on top of the iconic tower, overlooking the 14-hectare estate of Bushland and Formal Gardens. We hope that you've enjoyed the tour. Keep an eye out on our Facebook page or on the website for your opportunity to have a tour of Government House. Now you'll have to excuse...
And I must say, once again, a very, very grand affair every time you're there. And as they mentioned with the staff, the protocol is always up to date because you need to be there spot on the time. All the checks are done, and the entree card. Without the card, you cannot go inside. So, you know, it's always a great excitement once you receive that entree card. And now, lately with the COVID-19, the ceremonies, you know, they had to adapt, and all safety protocols being observed. You know, the ceremonies were spread aside rather than a group ceremony. It was in small clusters, which was good because it was more personalized, and the Governor could spend a little bit of time of all the recipients rather than just making a general address to the whole gathering there. So that was wonderful to see. So ladies and gentlemen, right now let's take a commercial break before we go into the news in brief. As we know, this live update is brought to you by Australian Indian Radio, and it's wonderful to have your company as usual. And this beautiful Saturday morning, as I look out the window, it is just beautiful. I'd rather be out there, but what's got to be done has to be done.
ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी 1989 से लेकर अब तक का विश्वसनीय और माननीय ब्रिस्बेन का रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। उषा चंद्रा, जो कि ग्लोबनेट की डायरेक्टर है, अपने ग्राहकों को ईमानदार और एथिक सर्विसेज देती हैं। अगर आप ब्रिस्बेन की प्रॉपर्टी में पूंजी लगाना चाहते हैं और आप चाहते हैं कि आपकी प्रॉपर्टी को प्रोफेशनली मैनेज किया जाए, तो आप आज ही कांटेक्ट कीजिए उषा चंद्रा को। लैंडलाइन नंबर है 38654466 और मोबाइल नंबर है 0419775416। और आप प्रॉपर्टी की अधिक जानकारी और करंट अपडेट्स के लिए हमारी वेबसाइट पे लॉगिन कर सकते हैं। हमारी वेबसाइट है www.globenetreality.com.au। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी आपका अपना लोकल रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। हमारा पता है ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, शॉप नंबर 5, 2281 सैंडगेट रोड, बुंदल, क्वींसलैंड। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, रियल एस्टेट इज अवर वर्ल्ड।
And real estate definitely is the world. But right now we will move on to the some news updates. First of all, let's hear from our Prime Minister and looking at the jobs and job creations and how we're going to get on with the job of the economic recovery. So here's our Prime Minister.
Sound check, how'd you go? Move for Moncrief. Well, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today in the beating heart of the Gold Coast. That is Creative Productions here in Mollendina. The owner of a local small business, Dave Jackson, we're at his business here today to make a great announcement, and I welcome with great gusto our Prime Minister to Moncrief, and also my Gold Coast colleagues and Minister Michaelia Cash also for this announcement today to support local jobs and to support local business in the movie industry. So with no further ado, I'll introduce our Prime Minister. Welcome to Moncrief.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you, Angie. It's great to be here. It's great to be back in Queensland. It's been a while since a Sydney sider has been able to be in Queensland, so I know many are enjoying that opportunity, and it's great to be here on the Gold Coast, certainly warmer than it was in Canberra earlier this morning. And I know many Southerners are enjoying that as well. Sadly, our friends in Victoria are unable to do that, particularly at this time. But before I say much more, let me just open by saying it's 5 years since MH17 was felled and shot down. 38 Australians perished, were killed in that attack. Some 298 souls were lost. And it is still a tragedy that continues to affect us all. And in all of the many meetings I've had with Prime Minister Rutte from the Dutch Prime Minister, we have spoken about this constantly as we continue to seek justice for those Australian lives that were lost and were taken from us. And we are as outraged about it today as we were many years ago, and we will continue to fight for their families and all of their loved ones in remembrance of those who were lost. But the reason for being here today is a much more positive one. And that is because we're about jobs. Our job maker plan is about ensuring that we have jobs right across Australia. And whether that is in the home building industry, whether that is in any parts of the hospitality, the tourism sector, the entertainment sector, where we announced some $250 million of support to get shows back on the road recently, we're about creating jobs. And a big part of the jobs that we can create, which we've known, has been in the film and screen industry. So much of which is represented here on the Gold Coast. I've been here on many occasions, particularly with Cowboy Dave. I've got to meet on the first occasion when I was here with Bert, and we made announcements about our support for the film industry. And every investment we have made as a government in the film industry here and right across the country has been a good one. It's produced the results we'd had hoped for. It has produced the jobs. And jobs and everything from sanitation to water supplies to sparkies to tradies to actors to special effects, and particularly Dave's business here, our other Dave here today, in the lighting industry and the technology side of this incredible business, with so much more of that business going down that path. It creates jobs. And today we are extending and putting a 7-year program in place to the tune of $400 million to ensure that we can attract those big films and productions and screen events for them to be produced right here in Australia. Earlier today I was able to meet with Baz Luhrmann over at the Village Roadshow studios where they're filming Elvis, and was so encouraged by Baz's great passion for Australia, which is well known, and great passion for the Australian film industry. But I'll tell you what he's even more passionate about, I think, is he's so proud of the jobs that he creates in the productions that he puts here in Australia, and is so passionate about the further jobs that are going to come. Already since making this announcement this morning, we have heard from Screen Australia's Jerry Bruckheimer's outfit and Ron Howard's outfit have already reached out to Australia on the basis of the announcement we have made today. There is serious interest in basing films here in Australia. We've already got Disney making films here. We've got the Marvel Syndicate. We've got Paramount Studios. All these big studios know our potential and capability here in Australia, and they've known it for many years. But they also know that this is a safe place to make a film. This is an industry that can be drawn on here in Australia to produce world-class productions. And whether it's Hollywood or Bollywood, or wherever they're coming from, they know they can come here and make the films that will create great success, but will generate the jobs, whether it's from making coffees or the quite sophisticated work which is done on prefabrication of sets. The film industry reaches into so many different sectors, and people who work in the sector also work in other industries, particularly here around the Gold Coast. And so this is an investment in jobs. 8,000 jobs every year, supported by this investment alone. And that, combined with the many other supports that are provided, will mean that our film industry, our screen industry, will be...
A great initiative there that will be supporting 8,000 jobs every year. As we know, the sound engineering, the screen awards and the screen industry, that is also a very vital part as well. And, you know, that is something very unique, which is to Gold Coast. Many of the film industry, you know, they like that location. They would like to come there. So, you know, any assistance from the government in that field of work is also very welcome. So that's a very, very good news there. But right now, you know, what are we challenging with? We are today challenged with the coronavirus. So with the coronavirus, the global challenge, the latest on world's fight against the coronavirus each week. You know, there is an in-depth look at the spread of COVID-19. In this one, we will look at some of the information that's been provided, especially Victoria now has recorded the nation's highest single-day increase, and UK has accused the Russian hackers of trying to steal the vaccine and treatment research. That report right here, courtesy of ABC.
Hello, I'm Jeremy Fernandez. Coming up on the virus, hundreds of new cases of COVID-19 are detected, more border restrictions are imposed, and fears the outbreaks in Melbourne and southwestern Sydney are still growing. Plus, Russian hackers are accused of trying to steal research into a coronavirus vaccine. But we begin in Victoria, which has now recorded the nation's highest ever single-day increase of COVID-19. 428 people have tested positive in the space of just one day. And there is some suggestion that Victoria could be placed into level 4 restrictions. Testing is also being increased in regional Victoria, and people in those areas are being asked to wear face masks if physical distancing is impossible.
If you are out and about in regional Victoria and you don't think you can maintain that social distance, then we are requesting of you that you wear a mask. That is a small thing, but it can make a really big difference in stopping the spread of this virus and keeping those low numbers in regional Victoria very low, so that we don't have to be changing the settings and the rules for regional areas of our state.
Meanwhile, across the border in New South Wales, health authorities are also detecting new cases. Worryingly, some are what they call tertiary infections, meaning they're not directly linked to the Crossroads Hotel cluster in southwestern Sydney. Health authorities are now using genomic sequencing to work out how the virus is mutating. And to try to stop the spread of the virus, the New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian has announced a return to restrictions on public gatherings, pubs, clubs, restaurants and cafes.
This is to give us every opportunity to keep New South Wales as open as possible, every opportunity for New South Wales to keep moving forward. But we say this in the context that we have to be flexible, we have to appreciate that once this disease gets into the community, it moves very, very quickly and in ways in which we can't always predict.
So in response to the outbreaks in Victoria and New South Wales, the other states and territories are raising or reintroducing border restrictions. All states and territories are stopping Victorians from visiting. Those permitted to do so must isolate for 14 days, possibly at their own expense. The situation for people from New South Wales is a little more complicated. State borders to WA, South Australia and Tasmania remain closed. Anyone who's been to one of the declared Sydney hotspots of Campbelltown and Liverpool cannot enter Queensland. No one from Greater Sydney is being allowed into the Northern Territory. People from other parts of New South Wales must complete declarations detailing whether they've been to Sydney or Victoria recently. Now, if you're from elsewhere in the country, your travel may also be blocked or curtailed if you've recently travelled through Sydney or Victoria.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's the news update with the coronavirus around the country. Well, right now we're going to cross over to India and let's have a look at what's been happening there and what are the number of cases that are being reported there. So, with this report, let's go to India with our correspondent there and get the report from the coronavirus cases and what's happening right there in India.
Welcome to Rajya Sabha TV. I'm Tina Jha with News Tonight, where we get you the day's biggest news stories from across India and the world. And the top story tonight, Prime Minister Narendra Modi delivered a keynote address virtually at this year's high-level segment of the United Nations Economic and Social Council session on Friday. The Prime Minister spoke at the valedictory session along with the Prime Minister of Norway and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Let's listen in to what the Prime Minister said.
Today, through our domestic efforts, we are again playing a salient role in achieving Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. We are also supporting other developing countries in meeting their Sustainable Development Goals. Excellencies, India is home to 1/6 of humanity. We are mindful of our weight and responsibility. We know that if India succeeds in achieving its development objectives, it will go a long way in achievement of global goals. And so we have taken whole of society approach by engaging our states, our local governments, our civil society, communities, and our people. Our motto is Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas.
Defence Minister Rajnath Singh arrived in Ladakh on Friday to carry out a comprehensive review of the security scenario in the wake of the border standoff with China. Accompanied by Chief of Defence Staff General Bipin Rawat and Army Chief General M.M. Narvane, Rajnath Singh witnessed a military drill displaying combat readiness. He also addressed the Army and ITBP personnel. Here's a report on the Defence Minister's day-long Ladakh visit. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh witnessing a military drill involving a fleet of attack helicopters, tanks, infantry combat vehicles and ground commandos at a high-altitude forward base in Ladakh on Friday. In the drill, the Army and the Air Force displayed combat readiness in the region where India and China are engaged in a bitter border standoff. A large number of ground commandos, tanks, BMP infantry combat vehicles, Apache, Rudra and Mi-17 V5 helicopters took part in the drill at Stakna. Troops also carried out para-dropping and slithering exercises. Rajnath Singh also addressed personnel of the Army and ITBP in Lakoon. He told them that talks are underway to resolve the standoff in eastern Ladakh. But to what extent the issue will be resolved that cannot be guaranteed.
कुटुंबकम का संदेश सारे विश्व को किसी एक देश ने दिया है तो हमारे और आपके देश भारत ने दिया। हम अशांति नहीं चाहते, हम शांति चाहते। हमारा चरित्र रहा है कि हमने दुनिया के किसी भी देश के स्वाभिमान पर चोट पहुंचाने की कभी कोशिश नहीं की। लेकिन यह भी मैं कह देना चाहता हूं दो टूक शब्दों में, यदि कोई दुनिया की ताकत हमारे स्वाभिमान पर चोट पहुंचाने की कोशिश करेगी तो उसे किसी भी सूरत पे हम बर्दाश्त नहीं करेंगे, उसका हम मुंहतोड़ जवाब देने के लिए भी तैयार रहेंगे।
And that message there is very clear about the defense and the importance that's been placed on defense by the Indian forces. Now, ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to leave you with a glimpse of, well, I mean, people always try and see that if they could, live by the sea, the dream is always there. But as we have seen throughout the world, that there are many places where the tidal waves, the tsunamis, they hit these banks. So how would you be if this was your house? Central Coast beaches are coping a severe lessing from the low pressure system and major erosion on the foreshore and the beachfront homes. So some of their backyards have already gone. There's no fences there anymore. Now one of the house there is even showing the footings. Well, the other wonder for today is the solar eclipse. The first images of sun taken by the solar orbiter. The solar probe took the closest photos ever taken of sun's surface, showing the turbulent field of gas pockmarked by thousands of tiny solar flares. So it is always very fascinating. But let's take a quick look today as the ending part of our show. The sun's surface. And a close look at that. These images are the first ever taken so closely of sun's surface. Yes, so ladies and gentlemen, with that I need to say goodbye, and it's been wonderful having your company. It was wonderful to catch up with all the times and all the people who have sent me all these messages from all over the world. Aarti Rajawat as well, Manjula, and also all the way from India, and then Suresh Chandra as well. Thank you so much for connecting with us via this medium. It is wonderful to have your company. Enjoy the weekend, but most of all, very important, remain safe. Observe all the restrictions that are in place. Be responsible, enjoying yourself, enjoying the company of your loved ones, but always with that responsibility. So ladies and gentlemen, until Monday, it's goodbye from me. Thank you so much for your company. It's been wonderful to have your company. All the best.